where a Gen Xer and a millennial share this strength-based perspective through which they view the world. We are your hosts, Allison and Tess. I love the number 93. It was the year I graduated high school.
No way. Yeah, it's the year before I was born.
It's a great way for us to begin episode 93 of Genn and Millie. I've been really looking forward to our next conversation, Tess. I've been thinking a lot lately about how much work goes into this on your end, as I've started a new writing project. And part of that writing project is combining many methods and many mediums. And so I've been doing writing plus podcasting plus video plus some photography, and all via Instagram, and it is a lot of work. So I have tremendous gratitude for everything that you do on the backside of this, because really all I have to do is show up and chat and be myself. So thank you. But also thank you for encouraging me to try hard things. I think when we talked about chapter as a word for me for the new year, I have been thinking about stretching, how I stretch and continue to try to do things that are outside of my comfort zone, and getting into technology is definitely one of those.
I love that. I feel like you have such, you talk a lot about your high input, which makes sense, being your number one strength, but you discredit that. You discredit the fact that you have really high learner too, I think, right? And I think they're so close that you just always tend to favor input because it is higher, it is your number one. But I think that, and I do that too, like I discredit my input because my learner is so high, and the need to learn things deeply and learn them well tends to take precedent over learning a lot of things, or, vastly, expanding myself. And so I think it's even an opportunity, I hadn't really thought about it till you just said that. Like, I think it's an opportunity to tap into your learner a little bit more too, to get to a sense of mastering your craft, right? Mastering your communication, mastering your storytelling by concentrating on it this year. So I'm excited.
I'm also learning a lot this month, and today's a really unique day, by the way. It's 2/2.
Oh, 2/2/22.
It is.
Oh, crazy.
It's the lunar new year. It's a new moon. Yesterday was the first, and then a new moon in Aquarius. So there are all kinds of things that open up for expansion. And one of the things that I'm learning most is that I don't yet know me. I think I do. It's kind of like back to my communication strength. I think I articulate my point, but the receivers don't always get what I'm saying, and I've gotten some feedback that I can be quite vague. And so I've been asked recently some hard questions like, what do you want? Or what does this look like? Or what are you looking for? Or what are you planning for? Or what are you doing? And sometimes my response is, I don't know. I thought I did, but I don't, and I don't know. So
I think there's
the stories.
I'm going to interrupt you though, but part of the difference is that doesn't mean you don't know yourself, right? Knowing your wants and knowing yourself are different. They are.
Yep, but I think I'm really truly still learning me, and I'm so grateful for that. I hope I never stop learning me.
True.
But for sure, when I reflected on the last year, and then kind of put some intentions behind what I want for the chapter, it's been more acknowledgement and recognition of where I am, where I've been, and what's ahead. So the stories chapter, that whole adventure, is so much not a deviation, but an enhancement of me. And I'm really excited to be able to share another story. So I shared Cal's story. I'm excited to share another story this month, but I don't have the same accountability that I had in the weekly music notes. So as we had an hour green room yesterday, in our green room yesterday, I was talking about how that I can procrastinate in ways that I don't know that I realized. I just recently took my Christmas tree down. Just this last week. I always had that tree down by January 2nd.
That's crazy.
And there was something about it that felt so exhausting to me. And maybe it's because I wanted to hold on to the holiday because it was so good. Or maybe it was because it was the first time I've felt like I was celebrating the holiday. But I just didn't want to take the tree down. I was just putting it off. So there's a side of me that's like, oh, I didn't know that I was a procrastinator, but I am sometimes. And I'm very curious right now around research and women in our age group, in my age group, not yours, about ADHD and how our hormones affect our ability to focus. What that does, mind, body, soul. I'm just completely learning what 47-year-old me looks like. Little fun fact, since neither one of them listen, I often talk about my mom's 1+1.
I was wondering which neither one of them group you were talking about, your two kids or your two moms?
The two moms. So most of our listeners know that I'm adopted. I have my adopted mom and I have my biological mom. And they are really very, just remarkably, bizarrely similar in a lot of ways. So this is my birthday. One mom did not know how old I was. She said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're 46." And I was like, "I can't either because I'm actually 47."
Because it's not true.
And the other didn't know where I lived.
So,
wonderful. When you think about all these beautiful souls that we get to interact with as humans, I am learning tremendous empathy for them through the eyes of my daughter, who is doing her master's in social work, and she's teaching. Lauren's teaching me so much about trauma and about how we grow up in this world and what we carry with us, and the heavy Samsonite luggage that we all have, and it's really given me a lot of empathy.
I love that.
Not just for them, but for a whole lot of humans in my life. I think. Let's backtrack a little bit, but what I sent you today, I want to make sure that we talk about, and I have a couple notes of things that I wanted us to discuss here, and then, but I know we wanted to chat about the double space, Oxford comma lifestyle that recently our friend Jay posted about 2 spaces after the period. And I believe the post was something to the effect of, "Hey, Gen Xers, let it go."
Yeah, I mean, verbatim here. "Dear friends older than 37, you don't have to put 2 spaces after the period anymore. That was the typewriter era. You're free." And I'll credit, this was Barton Swaim was the person who tweeted this. I will say, though, that 2 different categories. Oxford comma, in my mind's proper English, I'll die on that hill. So, but you tagged me in this and said, let's talk about this. And I said, this would actually be perfect because I didn't know there was such a thing as a double space. So I need Barton Swaim to do a supplemental tweet or reply to this tweet that says, "Dear everyone younger than 37. There was this thing called a typewriter in which, in order to prevent errors and the ink running together, it was common practice to put 2 spaces after a period before you started a new sentence." I need him to say that too, because I think part of it's okay, yes, everyone over 37, let it go. But everyone under 37, or, maybe 30, under 30, there might be a little bit of a gap, that doesn't practice this, but also didn't know that it was actually a thing to practice it. It wasn't until college when I met one of the, person in my class at one point in time talked about the double spacing between periods. And as we were discussing this a little bit in the green room today, she said it in the context of the double period so she could get to the required page length. I remember it, remembering this conversation now. It was the paper was supposed to be 12 to 14 pages or something like that. And in order to get there, she's like, "Oh yeah, I just went into double spaces because a lot of people still do that." And I was like, "What do you mean still do that? What are you talking about?" And I had no idea. But she had a little bit older parents, and I think that was part of it too. But that's a big generational difference.
So you didn't take a typing class?
I took a typing class. I took a computer class.
Typing?
Yeah, it was.
Was it called typing?
It was. I think it was computer science or something like that. But we did a whole section on learning to type, but it was on a computer at that point. Like,
I
it was
actually
like,
took like a whole class on typing on a typewriter.
yeah, no, I've never typed on a typewriter before.
Oh, it's so magical.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's just nothing like, wow, I need to get one.
I almost at one
Oh,
point got one because I knew it would be magical and my context would love it. And that's actually, I know that I would love it. And I actually have this keyboard that I have as an external keyboard to my laptop that mimics the like pressure and sound of a typewriter. But it's like a modern, wireless keyboard. But that's what I used to type on it. Like, I feel like I would love it so much, but I've
I'm
never
so
typed on
sensory
it.
sensitive, and we talk a lot about what the senses are, and I can, when I think about the word typewriter, or even just saying the word typewriter, I can feel it. I can smell the inkiness of it. I can feel the way that I take the paper out. I can feel the way that I can hear the sound of loading it.
Crazy.
All the senses being honored by that. But what's interesting to me, Tess, is when you mentioned that, when I tagged you in it, it never occurred to me that you wouldn't know that.
I know it now, but at one point in my life, I did not know
Right.
that. It was not knowledge that I'd ever acquired because it wasn't a thing anymore. Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of beautiful when we think about the assumptions that we make regarding our conversations and really how this podcast all began. It was around assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
It was around, I assume you get what I'm saying. I assume you know who this is. I assume all of these pieces. And the last week for me, for sure, has been, and really the beginning of this new year has been such a reminder of the things that I assume are being said, the reading between the lines that I assume people do that isn't necessarily true, and how clear we have to be with our communication.
Yeah.
So I think I sent you today, and I have to, of course I know where this came from. So I read Yung Pueblo's work, and I tried to read his work on a daily basis every morning. I started with his first book, and now I'm into Clarity and Connection. And so I sent a quote to you from that book today that I want to read out loud. And the reason I want to talk a little bit about this is the 2 and all of those things, but also because we often talk here about resilience. We often talk here about strengths. We often talk about growth mindset, concept of purpose, but everything is relative. And yesterday in the green room, we talked about trauma is relative.
Yeah.
Grief is relative. Loss is relative. So this was, how lucky was I today that this was the reading that I had in my morning reading from Yung Pueblo's Clarity and Connection. Sometimes it takes your heart breaking a few times for you to become independent in important and healthy ways. Heartbreak shows you that your self-worth and wholeness should not depend on another's words or love. Use the hurt as a map that leads inward to pursue your healing and ignite your self-love. And the phrase that I've really felt connection to was use the hurt as a map. And one of the things I've been sharing with a lot of my coaching clients is around the concept of fear. And fear is energy. What I'm hopeful that we all can learn to do, but I'm still in the practice, is when fear shows up, that I can use it as momentum to move myself forward. And I think when you talk about using hurt or when Mr. Pueblo talks about using hurt as a map, to think about the ways that we can use fear as momentum. Fear is a hell of a motivator if we allow it to be. And I'm learning a lot about that. Recently I learned, not recently, for a while, about the dynamics of energy when it comes to, and I know that you and I can relate to this, the way that our friends show up, the way that our family members show up, the way that other humans in our life show up. And when they are not in their normal space, or they are not in their normal routine or capacity, or what we know to be their normal behavior, we have reactions to that, right? So if I shut down or disappear or get quiet, all of my circle, the circle that cares about me, is raising flags, knocking some cowbell around saying what's going on with her.
Yep.
There are assumptions made that something is wrong. And sometimes the assumption could be that things are going really well and I'm just really busy. But those close to me kind of react in their own way to a change in my standard behavior.
Yep.
So when I was thinking about hurt as a map, fear as momentum, assumptions that we make, it took me back to our green room conversation about things being relative. My ACEs score is high, but that doesn't mean that the trauma that I've experienced affects me any less than someone, or any more than someone who has a lower.
Has no ACEs score. Yeah.
Right. So when we consider like gauges of resilience or pieces of resilience, just because maybe on paper, I'm being dramatic there, but on paper I've had trauma.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that something so low level, like a breakup, and low level, quote unquote,
interesting that you define
just
it
a
that
relationship,
way. Okay.
that would screw me up, knock me completely off kilter, more than perhaps something else. And I was having this conversation actually with Lauren regarding someone who is significant in her life. He has experienced grief in very, very raw and real ways. And in her perception, maybe he doesn't deal with it the way that she thinks she would deal with it, or he should deal with it. And so we talked a lot about, like, how do we put these assumptions on people, and how do we, why do we do that? And then also back to that quote, like, hurt as a map. Everyone's map is so different.
It's so different. And it just reminds me of, something we were talking about yesterday too, with sharing about a friend who's going through grief. And, it just made me think, I've been processing and sitting in the fact that grief looks so different. And, there are elements that can hit you really, really hard, or you would expect to hit you hard, maybe that don't. And so I appreciate that and think about it that way. And it's interesting that you say you like that analogy that hurt is a map, but everyone's map is different, because generally we're at the point in society, in globalization, in the world, where maps are universal. They're the same. We have measured, calculated, analytical, set universality to an understanding of the map of the world. That has not always been the case in the world, right? Like, the earth was flat at one point in time, and that was the standard of science, right? That it did not include North and South America as we know it. And I think about it now, we can't quite understand the fact that maps are all different. But I think about even like the current debates, right? Pluto was a planet, then it didn't become a planet. Recently now it's in contention again. Like, it might be reintroduced as a planet again. Like, it's just like that. So now when we think about the variability of maps, we can think about like how we're constructing the universe and our solar system and what we know about it, and the fact that the definition of what is and what isn't included within that definition of a universe is debatable. And I kind of like that, because at first when you said everyone's map is different, immediately my mind said, no, maps are all the same. They should have all the same things, but really in history they have not. And still even today, it depends on what you're looking at and where you're looking. And are you looking at a topographical map or a geographical map, or, all sorts of different variances.
And it also brought me to the recognition, when you say everything is debatable, that's never been truer than in our society today.
Oh my gosh, the relativity of truth. Yeah.
And everything that's happening in the podcasting world, everything that's happening on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
It has given me a whole lot of perspective. This morning when I was thinking about, okay, we're recording, if we were ever to be audited by the Truth IRS.
Yeah, we're on Spotify. Yeah.
Also, I have been thinking about, and I may have shared this story before, so I wrote a piece, I wrote a blog piece a while back about a dream that I had. And it was just absolutely fascinating to me. I wrote about a dream that I had. Okay? It was clearly stated I had this dream. It wasn't, today I was walking down the street and this was my experience. I clearly stated this was a dream.
Okay.
And human beings immediately assumed it was about them. Like, how dare you? How dare you?
For real?
You know, have a dream about me and misrepresent me this way. And I'm like, well, what the?
Also, I don't have a lot of control over what my subconscious does during the night.
I don't.
Sorry.
But I was able to articulate, this is not about you. And it made me so conscientious of what I put out there in my communication space.
Yeah.
What I may say in a training, what I might put on my blog, how I represented Cal in his story. Did that feel honoring to him? Did that feel like truth? Because I felt like I was backtracking by sharing about a dream that it made me initially feel like, oh my God, is this person like going to sue me? Over what? My dream that I had? But also, I mean, what a great example of how we show up in the world.
Oh my gosh.
I love that I have a daughter and a son who will call me out on this all the time. It's not about you, Mom. Hey, Mom, not about you. That's helped me over the years to not take things so personal, but also to realize that I'm not responsible for someone else's feelings. And if you take one of my poorly written blogs and get so fired up about it, like, wow, are you giving me a lot of power?
Yeah.
Like, just
True.
please let go of that. And by the way, it's not about you.
Yeah.
But it also, like
good.
today, you know, now with everything in the podcasting space, we are just all navigating this. What is truth? Brene is not putting out her podcast conversation. She's taking a break because this is what I love about her. She has no problem saying, I don't know.
Yep.
She is freaking brilliant. She is one of the most respected researchers and one of the most, I mean, absolutely talented storytellers. And she has no problem saying, you know what, I don't know how to handle this. So I'm going to take a pause and say, I'm not sure. And I loved reading kind of her statement, because I've been trying to find my words to tell people in my life who are trying to push me along as to, where are you going? What are you doing? What do you want? I want to be able to say, I don't know.
And that's
Thanks.
okay. It's not about getting to that point, right? Life isn't about getting to some designated point you're supposed to get to, or you think you're supposed to get to. Yeah.
But I also, it's in the same vein, it's made me think about, it's my only hope for my purpose in this world is to leave people better than they happened upon me.
Yeah.
And if it ever feels anything other than that, I want to hold that space. I was so lucky to have such a fabulous birthday and feel, so loved, so appreciated, so treasured, that I kind of walked away from January 21st thinking, I have everything I need right now. So anybody who pushes me along to say, what about this, or what's next, or I can say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm content, and I could say, I don't know, but also at the same time be thoughtful about what is that energy that I'm leaving behind. Energy creates energy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So, as per usual, we go in about 14 different directions. What I wanted for us to talk a little bit about today is that mapping. I knew that anytime I use the word map, like your
you can
brain,
see, yeah, 1, 2, you can see 3 within, right in my background.
when I hear the word map, I think of how Tess sees maps. So I loved the language of hurt as a map because it made me think about context, which is one of my lesser talents. Harder for me to go into the past, but if I could looking back as a map as to how I might better hold myself, hold others, hurt can be a really powerful gift.
And I think if you think about conceptually what a map is, it's not MapQuest, right? It's not telling you where to go. It's a read on what is. And I think about that, right? Like any experience of hurt that you've had, and I'm sure I've shared this before, but I always one of my pastors at some point, gave this analogy of like someone bumps you, someone hurts you, like, and we talk about like the, your empty bucket. It's like your bucket basically, but the pastor, when I first heard them talk about this, and I can't even place it or remember it, or else I would give credit, but they said the only thing that splashes out of your bucket when someone hurts you is what was in it to begin with. And when I think about hurt as a map, that's what I think about, right? Like a map is a notation, a cartographical representation of a space. And so it's not directions, it's not an atlas, it's not, it's a depiction of what is. And so when you're hurt, how you react, right? How you go forward, how you've gone forward since then, right? What emotions are present, how it ties to what was or what is, all of those things, right? Who was there? When did it happen? Why did the emotions arise that it happened? It's almost like an unpacking of the situation. And I think we want to get past the hurt so much. Oftentimes, yes. Right? No matter what that hurt was, we're ready to get past it. And I love it as like a motivator, like you using that word around fear, but that automatically implies that you're moving forward, you're going somewhere, right? But dialing it back to saying that it's a map is like auditing what's there before you use it to propel you forward. Because if you don't, right, if you just use it as a motivator, you've already moved out of what was. And if you're not using it as a map, right? Like, so I think they're parallel and they can work together really well. But my bias, having high context, loving maps, loving this analogy, is that you have to sit in what is, right? Before you can move on to what can be and how you can use it as a source of energy for resiliency.
This is why I love these conversations, because you bring your own perspective. What I was thinking about most, and of course this points to my communication strength, is how we can take these quote unquote negative words, and when we pair them with a different word, we can see them differently. So hurt as a map takes the negativity off of hurt.
The heaviness.
Fear as a motivation, or fear as a momentum, takes the negativity or the anxiousness off fear. And so back to energy creates energy. What I was thinking about is one is backward or looking back, and another one is forward facing. But both of them are required in order to get to the topography of resilience. Like that climb cannot happen without both.
It can't, right? Because if you're not being pulled out of it, you can sit in and examine the hurt forever, right? But if you don't sit in and examine the hurt, being propelled onto something else, right, is just going to mean that the next time the hurt is probably going to hurt more because you haven't examined why it settled that way.
Or you'll carry your hurt and project it onto someone else.
Oh, yeah.
So I think part of the reason this is good to discuss right now is we're still in that new year-ishness. And, I'm still in the examination of what did I learn from last year and how do I want to apply it. But also, 2-2-2-2. And I got this, of course, from from a spirit guide, but to write down 22 things that you're grateful for and 22 things that you desire or wish for. And I started to look at this writing assignment, going into today. And I was thinking, there's so much alignment. There's so much alignment in what I'm grateful for and what I hope for. And that helps me to see the importance of the hurt map and the importance of the fear momentum. Because I know at 47, because of experiences and because of those ACEs, that they're necessary in order for us to have growth. But we resist that. And we resist the uncomfortable feeling of looking at the hurt and the uncomfortable feeling of the fear. And I think that is universal. Again, it could be very relative.
Yeah, it's so relative. It's interesting because this actually reminds me, I was going to bring up a conversation that we had in one of my classes last semester about suffering. And is suffering required to grow? And I think it was at those universal ends of like, we're thinking about, suffering. But I think it is really, really relative, right? And that's what I appreciate about this is that everyone will encounter suffering. But it's up to the individual person's definition of what that entails, right? It might be like the worst suffering you might ever have is not getting into a college you want to go to, right? Or it might be having a very, very high ACEs score and having textbook definitions of trauma that has happened in your life.
Right. And we have to do the examination, right? And the stretch to be able to understand and feel that. I also think this is a great conversation starter for our listeners, for those that they are close to, for those who are maybe new to their life or strong connections in their circle. We have to check our assumptions on why people are showing up the way that they're showing up.
For sure.
Why someone might shut down or disappear, or why someone may be overly communicative, or why someone may be in our own perception be behaving or making decisions that we don't understand. And I feel lucky that I have empathy in my top 5 because it's easy for me to think, oh my gosh, I can only imagine what it feels like to be A, B, or C. That just comes really natural to me. But also understanding that it's a 133 million chance that someone is going to show up exactly like I do. And even then they don't. Because it's experiences, it's values, it's all of those pieces. So I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine who was really questioning my forgiveness superpower as a weakness. And I felt myself getting defensive, and I felt myself reacting. Could even feel it physically in my body. I kind of do this thing with my shoulders when I'm like, listen here, I got something to say. And I had a recognition that she simply will not get it, that I choose forgiveness as a pathway to let go. And if I held on, it would keep me stuck.
Yep. And that's forgiveness, right? Okay, so we've talked about this here before, right? Forgiveness versus reconciliation. Yes. Forgiveness is about getting right with yourself. And there might be times, especially in times when you've encountered trauma with another person, or trust has been betrayed, or they have said things that, there might be situations in which forgiveness is all that can be extended. And that's getting right with yourself, right? Getting your heart right, getting your soul right, getting your spirit right. And then there are times where reconciliation can be had, right? Where there's restoration of the relationship in some way, shape, or form.
Or it could look different.
Yeah.
It could look very different.
Yeah, for sure.
So there are some great songs out now that kind of represent some of that and some of that language. Some of them are really, really good. I just fell upon recently a song that lit me up. I love it so much. And the lyrics are like, I'm resisting the desire to punch you in the teeth. However, it like leads to, because I'm trying to move forward. it was just like, and the song leads up, and the momentum of the song is really good. It's fantastic. I've been doing a lot of, you'd be so proud, Tess. I am so grateful for Spotify and Release Radar and Discover Weekly that feeds me new music.
Yep.
And I'll be out. And remember when I didn't even know what it was?
Yeah, you didn't. And you were like confined and restricted by CD-ROMs. I mean, like just think about like how reductive.
Please say that phrase again. One more time.
No. Play it back. Yes, confined and restricted by CD-ROMs. I mean, right? It's like a definitive number of songs in a specific order that you have to intentionally deviate from.
Uh-huh.
It's
So it feeds me new music, and I have very few songs that will stop me in my tracks. And when I say stop me in my tracks, I remember the first time it happened, I was actually traveling out here. It was right ahead of my 14er that I did the first time.
Yeah.
And I was in the hotel elevator, and someone had sent me this song. It's a beautiful song called Transatlantic Flight. And it's so stunningly gorgeous, and the lyrics are so beautiful. I was getting out of the elevator, and I just stopped. There is music like that. There are songs like that that just stop me. And there have been a couple recently that help me, as per usual, feel and articulate what I'm thinking I'm saying, but I'm not really saying, but this beautiful musician does a better job than I do. And since that's been happening lately, I started just listening more. As always, I listen to the lyrics, but I'm like, holy shit, everybody has a hurt map. Musicians, like that's when they get their best, their best songs come from heartbreak and hurt and grief and angst and anxiety. That's, when we talk about being below the line, being in those places of fear and anxiety and sadness, that's where some of these beautiful gifts come.
Yep.
And so I've been recognizing it is universal, but so relative.
Yeah.
And so it's given me like even the empathy to look around, going up and down the steps and running into somebody I don't know.
Yeah.
And just feeling.
Yeah.
Like, I hope you feel seen and heard. I don't say it out loud, thank God, yet. Can you imagine? I was just walking around on my hikes like, hope you feel seen and heard.
Like, I hope you feel known today. I hope you feel valued. Please do that. That's a social experiment.
Great sociological, yes, I would love that. But it just has really, and we're in February now, which is the month of love and the month of the holiday I hate the most, to really start thinking about that.
Yeah.
That hurt as a map and how those maps look so very different.
I love that. And I think it's so helpful to see like the relativity of it continuing on this concept. And it's something I've had to learn a lot because of even, talking with you and being friends with you. And then my good friend Alex too, and a few other people in my life that have gone through some like significant trauma, like have experienced major things in life, and being in relationship with people like that, having no textbook definition of that in my life, having to extend grace to myself. Like there were many, many times where I would be feeling hurt or rejection or, my common emotion, anger, right? Like all of these things that I would just be processing emotionally. And my mind would always be like, but Tess, remember how grateful you should be, right? How blessed you are, how you haven't had to walk through anything significant. And so I would minimize my emotions and say that they aren't valid, not in and of themselves, but in relative perspective to those people who have walked through things. And I feel like that's the duality of it, that we can both say trauma is relative individually in your own life because you're going to respond differently regards to different situations based on what you've walked through, but it's relative to one another, but needs to be honored in its individuality, in its singularity, precisely because of that, right? Like I think relativity by definition connotes the idea of comparison, right? Like comparing one experience to another, and that's what I want to make sure that we like define very separately, because I have not processed things in my life at certain points in time precisely because I didn't feel like it made sense for me to feel that way, because I haven't walked through certain things, because I haven't experienced certain rejections, because I haven't walked through this type of trauma that I know someone else has walked through. So why do I feel this way, or why am I scared of this, or why do I not feel brave enough to do something like this? Because I don't have those hurts in my life.
And comparison is I think the thief of joy is the quote, but also we're all doing it.
Yeah.
We're all doing it all the time in different ways, whether we're talking about what car we drive, talking about, what job we have, talking about our friend circle, what we did on Friday night. Social media has elevated that in a completely new and different way. It's also, I think, comparison right now generationally is like nothing we've ever known. And I'm witnessing this through you, and I witnessed this through my son and my daughter and my bonus kids. But the expectation that we have on young people to know and map out their future is devastatingly negative, in my opinion. It sets people up for disappointment and comparison, because we have this, my generation, Tess, I was taught, you're going to go to Lincoln School of Commerce and you're going to have 2 children, and you should probably grow up on the farm that you stay within this circle of where you've been.
Oh yeah.
And what I've been learning recently is, again, comparison. In my tightest of circles, I have always seen myself as the rebel, the gypsy, the one that's doing things different. Like, I'm badass. And recently I had someone, we talked about this before, someone called me a rule follower, and I'm like, how dare you? That's not true. And then I asked my friends, and I'm like,
yeah. You are.
Best phrase recently was, it's so adorable that you think you're such a gypsy when you're actually such a Girl Scout. And I was like, that's not true. That's not true. But then I started like really digging into it. Again, it shows up. It shows up for a reason. So I'm like looking at it and I'm thinking, I think I project this. But what I'm actually projecting is, I like my structure. I like my routine. However, in my circle of influence at the core of it, so for everybody that's different. When did that start for you? When did that start for me? When does that start for my son, my daughter? When do you start seeing, like, this is what it should look like? And that was very deeply ingrained in me. It should look like this. And I rebelled right away by not following rules, which made me feel like, oh, okay, therefore everybody thinks I'm a rebel. No, everyone saw the circumstance. I just chose to see it as like, look at me.
Like, it's intrinsic rather than external factors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. That's nuanced.
I was thinking about this with Sean and Shanna, who are making big decisions about their life. And so I've encouraged them to, this is very TikTok-y, but to put together a PowerPoint about their decision making and present it to all of us as a family. And then we get to fire back with questions, or we get to fire back with our own proposals on, why we'd like for them to be A, B, or C.
To Colorado.
Right. So then I came back to them and I said, do you know what my slide would say? It would say, I love you and I support you no matter what. And wherever you are, I will come to you.
Yep.
I also went back to them and said, hey, put this proposal together and run your numbers, but give it to people who are unbiased.
Yeah.
Because we're all biased who love you. We want you close to us. But I got to thinking about how many, and I'm going to put you in this category of young people, are trying to figure out that PowerPoint. And we put so much pressure for you to have it finished and finalized. And that's so unfair. I still don't know who I am, and I'm in my mid-40s. I still don't know who I am. I still can't answer what's next, what's going to happen, what do you want? I don't know. Brene Brown doesn't know. So why do we put this expectation on 18-year-olds to know?
Yeah.
or 25-year-olds to know. Like, that's not fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or is it setting them up for any kind of success?
Yeah. That's good.
Did you feel that pressure?
Internally, yes. I don't feel like I ever felt it externally. From my circle, from my people. It was always in my head. I mean, I never put together a PowerPoint. I never crunched the numbers like on a spreadsheet, but I was going through all of the options in my head, like everything, and that's that strategic. Every possible pathway with every possible outcome was always being weighted, and those weights changed a lot based on new information that I acquired about universities and statistics and of acceptance rates and funding packages and things like that. With every yes, no, maybe, those were adjusted. And it's constantly like that now too, because I have a billion possible outcomes, like even for just this summer, of how to spend my time and, in the coming years, and where to go with my research and what to do after I finish my degree. So it's always there. But I think I don't know what it is about, my strengths. I think it's derived in a lot from my Enneagram type, which is like, I appreciate other people's opinions, but I know what I'm going to do. And it's very, very rarely ever based on anyone else's input. It's always based on my own research, always based on my own gut. Yeah.
I hope you know how much you have energy creates energy, how you have inspired me to be better about that. Now, my most natural self is, of course, I value other people's opinions. I've got this high input, high woo. Tell me what you think. Yeah. But I am getting much better at saying, and you know what? That's great. I value your opinion, but at the end of the day, this is my life.
Yeah.
And I have to figure it out. I think the hurt map has helped me to be more intrinsically motivated.
Yeah.
But without the hurt map, I think I still would have fell into that people pleasing, which I still fall into. We've talked a lot about the existential conversation about choice.
Yeah.
That where you are right now, Tess, was influenced by a lot of other choices and not necessarily happenstance, but there's some things involved in there. But like, you're creating energy now that affects other humans. I was on a call with a potential corporate partner, learning a little bit more about teammates, and I, as I always do, throw around ripple effect, and I said, my friend Shane, and she stopped me and she said, "Are you talking about Shane Lopez?" And I put my hand over my heart and I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm a big fan of his work and I've read his book." And I told her there probably wasn't a shorter, stronger, like in a burst of energy. He so changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
And taught that to me, right? Like, your energy could send someone in a different direction. And his influence and his choices and the way he saw me greatly influenced my life and where I would go next and how I would speak to the concept of strengths and hope and engagement. And we all have those influences, right? But do we see and recognize and know our own? And how are we gifting that
Definitely
energy
not
to other people?
Right. I mean, that's why we talk all the time when when you train mentors, you talk all the time about letting, do your mentors, have you ever told the mentor that you wrote down on your name card in your life, have you ever told them about the impact that they had on you? And most people haven't, right? And most of those people that are written down have no idea of the effect that they've had on people. And, every chance I get, I thank my mentors, and I think I'm always blown away by the fact that they don't realize their impact, right? So how can we? We can't. Right. We can't ever know the full extent of the impact we have on each other's lives. But the gift that we can give to maybe get a better understanding of that is by thanking the people who've impacted us. And that's the whole concept of the ripple effect then. And they thank the mentors in their lives and so on and so forth.
And I think that's a key part to the resilience recipe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is that you have people in your life who, whether it's a mentor or part of that support system. And I know you and I talked a little bit in the green room yesterday about support systems.
Yeah.
And what those look like, and how sometimes we are the supporter and sometimes we are the supportee. But like that's part of the recipe for resilience.
Yeah.
Holding up and thinking, I can do this all by myself.
Yep. That's why the idea, oh my gosh, so the tech world, right, has been in the news with the Elizabeth Holmes trial and entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley, but that's why the idea of being a self-starter is a fallacy. And I think that's something that in the American individualist American dream context, right? Like we believe that we have to do it on our own in order to be successful, but the reality is we can't, nor should we, because the potential for our success is completely dependent on the support system and the community around us of friends and family and coworkers, colleagues, mentors, the gambit.
And I can remember this quote from Aaron Davis that he said many, many years ago when I heard him, probably 2005-ish. He gave me the phrase that he was help-made. He said, I'm not self-made, Allison. I'm help-made. And I remember that really sticking with me, not just as a concept of tremendous gratitude, but hoping that I could do that for someone else.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever really know what that reaching out, kindness, extension of, I care about you. Are you alive? Are you okay? Are you well? You're in my head. I want you to know. I don't think we have any idea of how often that is needed. There are a lot of people in my life who have an assumption that at all times things are going really well for me. And they don't have a clue that when they reach out and say, I'm just checking on you, that it might be exactly the right time that I need it.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Okay, so we want people to reflect on the concept of hurt being a map and fear maybe as a motivator. I think overall with your concept of communication kind of reframing, I would love to hear how other ways that resiliency has allowed the reframing of negative experiences or negative emotions into positive things. So I'd love to hear what other analogies, metaphors, imagery, or simply reframing of negative experiences or emotions that you maybe cling to. It makes me think about like harken back, way archetypal, our idea of there are no failures, only learning opportunities. And that's a reframing, right, of negative experiences. I love it. Anything else?
I think this was a
I think
good
that's the big,
reintroduction into the new year again.
I love it. I do want to give a listener shout out before we conclude today to our lovely friend JC Joyce, who was, I think so far, from my email records, the only person we heard back from on the concept of feedback, and was a person that motivated this a little bit, because I think at least I had first heard about 360 from JC. I'm sure she's okay with me reading a little bit of what she wrote to us. We can take it down if you don't want us to, JC. Let us know after it's been published. Sorry. We love you. So at one point in time, she sent us this great, email and feedback, and she gets 360 on a regular basis from over 200 people that give her feedback. And so she wrote to us and said, I can't say that I love the process, as 200 people get to tell me what they think of me anonymously, but I absolutely see the value. I've made changes to how I lead as a result of the feedback, and given all of this feedback and how I feel during the process, I think a personal/non-business 360 would be just as scary and just as valuable, since she kind of has experienced 360 within the space of the workplace. And I just remember when she first talked about that with us, and she was on a podcast episode quite some time ago, it was over the course of the pandemic, right? Because we were at home. I remember that. But I remember her just talking about how, some of the best ways to honor other people is by reading that feedback and then adjusting how she manages and how she leads and how she interacts with the people in her life, because we come to whatever position we're in from a place of our own strengths and life experiences and values. And so naturally we lead in the way we would want to be led, rather than in the way that our people need to be led. So
I think about how during some experiences that I've had with a group, it's not as technical as 360, but it's here's where you shine, and here's where you struggle.
I love that.
And I would love, and I may ask this of my circles, to tell me.
Yeah.
Especially right now, I feel like I'm in this place of I'm being asked hard questions that I don't know how to answer, and the way that I love feedback is for someone to help me better understand myself so that I can show up in the world a better version. So I think, another challenge to our listeners would be, how can you have a conversation about where someone shines and maybe where they struggle, and start easy by asking like a 6-year-old, like, tell me, where do I shine, and they are so good at this.
They're so honest. Yep. Kids are so honest.
So honest. I'm really lucky to have that. I get to be a bonus aunt to a number of littles here in the Denver community, and I love how honest they are with me.
I love it. But it was awesome. I know we weren't really focusing on feedback this episode, but I definitely wanted to give a shout out to JC, who without fail, whenever she responds so well in such detail and with such thought, and I'm very appreciative of that.
She is a ripple effect human in my life, and I cannot even imagine how many.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 93 of Genn and Millie. If you enjoyed today's conversation, consider sharing this episode with a friend. To interact with us and share the responses to the questions and action items that we posed, you can give us a follow on Instagram at Genn and Millie. That's at GENNANDMILLIE. Until next time.